The camera shutter clicked 3 times in rapid succession before I fully processed what I'd captured. My hands trembled as I reviewed the images on the digital display, zooming in on faces that would ignite a firestorm the moment they went public. Councilman Gregory Marks, the city's golden boy, champion of anti-corruption reform, stood shoulder to shoulder with Caius King, the cartel leader whose organization moved more cocaine through our ports than legitimate cargo. Their handshake was frozen in perfect clarity against the backdrop of the Peninsula Club's restricted upper lounge, a manila envelope exchanging hands between them like a benediction. This was it. The evidence I needed to expose the money laundering network that had been filtering cartel millions through real estate developments across the waterfront. Senator-level corruption meeting international criminal enterprise, documented in 4K resolution. I should have left immediately. Should have walked straight out of the Peninsula Tower and driven directly to my editor's office at the Tribune. But 5 years of investigative journalism had taught me to be thorough, and thoroughness meant getting one more angle, one more shot that would make the story undeniable, ironclad against the inevitable legal counterattack. I repositioned myself behind the decorative ficus that had provided cover for the past 30 minutes, adjusting my telephoto lens for a clearer view of the documents King was sliding across the table. Bank routing numbers, property deeds, the paper trail that would connect Marks to at least 8 shell corporations I'd been tracking for months. That's when I heard my name. Jordan. I know you're here. Brock's voice carried across the marble atrium below, each syllable soaked in the false calm I'd learned to fear during our 2 years together. The tone he used right before his hands became fists. 4 months. I'd managed to stay hidden for 4 months after fleeing our apartment with nothing but my camera equipment, my laptop, and a duffel bag of clothes thrown together while he was at the gym. 4 months of sleeping in different friends' apartments, never staying more than 2 nights in one place. 4 months of paying for everything in cash, using burner phones, avoiding every routine he might predict. 4 months of freedom that apparently ended today. My throat constricted as I peered carefully over the 20th floor balcony railing, keeping myself hidden behind the architectural column. He stood near the concierge desk, scanning the upper floors with methodical precision, his head moving in a grid pattern, like he was clearing rooms during a military operation. The same systematic approach he'd used to track my phone location, monitor my email, control every aspect of my life until I'd finally understood that love wasn't supposed to feel like surveillance. The same expensive navy suit he'd always preferred, Armani with razor-sharp creases he had the dry cleaner press twice. The same haircut he maintained every 2 weeks without exception, fade cut with the top slicked back. But his face held something new, a hardness around the jaw, a coldness in his eyes that made my stomach clench with recognition. This wasn't the man who'd once brought me coffee every morning, who'd laughed at my terrible jokes, who'd made me believe I was cherished. This was the man who'd dislocated my shoulder when I'd tried to attend my college roommate's wedding alone. The man who'd smashed my first camera against the kitchen wall because I'd taken a freelance assignment without discussing it with him first. The security guard said a journalist came up here about 40 minutes ago. Brock's voice grew louder as he moved toward the elevator bank, his dress shoes clicking against the polished floor. Brunette, late 20s, carrying professional camera equipment. That sounds exactly like you, doesn't it, Jordan? I backed away from the railing, my camera bag suddenly feeling like an anchor weighing me down, making me visible, marking me as prey. The service elevator was on the opposite side of the building, requiring me to cross the open atrium. The main elevators would deposit me directly into the lobby, straight into his line of sight. The emergency stairwell exit required passing through the security checkpoint near the concierge desk where he was standing. Every escape route led straight to him. Panic clouded my judgment as I scanned the hallway for anywhere to hide, anywhere to disappear. Office doors lined both sides of the corridor, most displaying frosted glass with company names etched in elegant chrome lettering. Financial advisors, venture capital firms, import-export consulting, maritime logistics, all locked for the evening, their interior lights dark except for emergency exit signs. All except one, at the very end of the hallway, where warm light spilled through a door that had been left slightly ajar. I didn't think. Couldn't think beyond the primal need to not be found. Survival instinct propelled me forward, my footsteps muffled by thick charcoal carpeting as I ran toward that light like a drowning person swimming toward the surface. Behind me, I heard the elevator chime that soft, civilized ding that meant the doors were opening on the 20th floor. Heard Brock's footsteps emerging onto my level. Heard him call my name again, closer now, the false patience cracking to reveal the fury underneath. Jordan, don't make this difficult. The office door swung wider as I shoved through it, and I immediately realized my mistake. This wasn't an empty conference room or vacant workspace I could hide in until he gave up searching. This was someone's private office, and that someone was currently occupying it. If you're still thinking about them, subscribe and become part of our story family. Your support is what keeps these emotional journeys alive. Comment where you're watching from. Let's share this experience together. 3 men filled the space. 2 stood flanking the sides of the room like sentinels, one near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, one near a sidebar where crystal decanters caught the light. Both wore dark suits and the kind of stillness that suggested they were paid to be dangerous. The 3rd man sat behind a massive ebony desk that dominated the room, his attention focused on documents spread before him until my frantic entrance interrupted. All 3 turned toward me with identical expressions of cold assessment, evaluating me as simultaneously an intrusion and a potential threat. "I'm sorry," I stammered, already backing toward the door, my hand reaching for the handle. "Wrong office. I didn't mean to. I'll just lock it." The man behind the desk spoke without raising his voice, yet his words carried absolute, unquestionable authority. One of the standing men, the one positioned near the windows, moved with fluid, economical efficiency, crossing the distance between us and turning the deadbolt with a decisive click that echoed through the sudden, heavy silence. My hand was still extended toward the doorknob, now useless, when Brock's fist hammered against the wood from the other side. "Jordan, open this door right now." His voice had shifted from false patience to barely contained rage, the transformation instant and chilling. "We need to talk. You don't get to just disappear for 4 months without explanation. Open the goddamn door. I don't think the lady wants to talk to you." The man behind the desk rose, and I got my first clear look at him. He was younger than I'd initially thought, mid-30s, maybe 37 or 38, with black hair cut short on the sides but long enough on top to show a slight wave. His face was all sharp angles and strong lines, aristocratic bone structure that belonged on a European runway or a Roman coin. Broad shoulders filled out a charcoal suit that moved with him like it had been tailored specifically to his frame, the fabric catching light as he circled the desk with predatory, controlled grace. But it was his eyes that held me frozen. Dark brown, almost black in the office lighting, and utterly, completely cold, assessing me with the same calculating intensity one might evaluate a chess piece mid-game, determining whether I was an asset, a liability, or irrelevant. "This is between me and my girlfriend," Brock shouted through the door, his fist hitting the wood again, making the solid barrier shudder. "Just a misunderstanding. She gets dramatic sometimes. Jordan, stop being childish and open the door." "Ex-boyfriend," I whispered, though I wasn't entirely sure why I felt compelled to correct him to this stranger, this man whose office I'd just invaded. Maybe because the distinction mattered. Maybe because calling Brock my boyfriend felt like erasing 4 months of freedom, of reclaiming my life. The man's gaze sharpened, his focus intensifying on my face like I'd just revealed something significant. "Interesting." He gestured to the sentinel who'd locked the door, his movement economical and precise. "Alex, remove this man from the premises. Immediately." 5 minutes earlier, Jordan Heller had been doing exactly what she was trained to do: document truth, no matter the cost. She'd positioned herself on the 20th floor mezzanine of the Peninsula Tower at precisely 7:45 p.m., knowing from 3 weeks of surveillance that Councilman Marks arrived at the Peninsula Club every Thursday at 8:00 p.m. for what his public calendar listed as constituent meetings. Knowing from intercepted text messages that tonight's meeting was different tonight, Caius King himself would be attending, the reclusive cartel leader who never appeared in public, whose photograph existed in exactly 4 confirmed images across all law enforcement databases. The Peninsula Tower's architecture had provided perfect cover and open atrium design with interior balconies overlooking the lobby, decorative plants positioned for aesthetic appeal that coincidentally created blind spots in the security camera coverage. Jordan had studied those blind spots for 2 days, timing the security guard rotations, identifying the 60-second windows when she could move between positions without being recorded. She'd been wearing black pants and a dark green blouse, professional enough to blend in as someone who belonged in the building, but practical enough to move quickly. Her camera bag held 3 lenses, 2 backup batteries, and her reporter's notebook filled with 6 months of investigative notes connecting Marks to King's money laundering operation. The photographs she'd captured were extraordinary, crystal clear despite the distance, properly exposed despite the difficult lighting conditions, perfectly framed to show both faces and the exchange of documents. Her editor would publish these on the front page. The FBI would launch an immediate investigation. Her career would be defined by this moment. She'd been reviewing the images on her camera's display screen, making sure she had everything she needed, when Brock's voice had shattered her concentration like a gunshot in a library. Now she stood in Finnick Rhodes's office, though she didn't know his name yet. Didn't know anything about him except that he'd just saved her from Brock with 3 words and a single command. The office was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city's waterfront, the harbor lights glittering against dark water. The ebony desk was massive, custom-built, its surface holding nothing except a laptop, a leather portfolio, and a crystal tumbler of what looked like expensive scotch. 2 Barcelona chairs in black leather faced the desk, positioned for visitors who came to negotiate. The artwork on the walls was original. Jordan recognized a Rothko, a small Basquiat, pieces that cost more than most people's houses. This wasn't the office of a legitimate businessman. This was the office of someone who needed to project power, control, untouchable authority. Finnick Rhodes stood beside his desk now, one hand resting casually on the polished surface, watching her with those calculating dark eyes. He was tall, at least 6'2", and moved with a kind of controlled physicality that suggested either military training or something more dangerous. His suit was Brioni, she noted absently, the kind worn by men who spent 5 figures on clothing without blinking. Your ex-boyfriend, Finnick said, his voice low and smooth, the kind of voice that could order violence while discussing wine selections, is currently being escorted to the lobby by my head of security. He won't be returning to this floor. He won't be bothering you again tonight. But I suspect he's not your most pressing problem. Jordan's hand instinctively tightened on her camera bag. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have burst in here. If you'll just let me leave. You're a journalist, Finnick interrupted, his gaze dropping to the professional camera visible in her partially open bag. Investigative, based on the equipment. You were photographing something or someone in this building. Something important enough to risk being here after hours. Something that has you running scared. It wasn't a question. Jordan said nothing, her journalist's instinct for protecting sources and stories warring with her survival instinct, screaming that this man already knew more than she wanted him to know. Finnick's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile if it had reached his eyes. Let me guess. You photographed something you shouldn't have. Someone you shouldn't have. And now you're wondering if you'll make it to your editor's office before the people in those photographs realize what you've done. He moved then, walking slowly toward her, each step deliberate. Jordan forced herself to stand still, to not back away, even though every instinct screamed at her to run. You won't make it, Finnick said, stopping 3 feet away, close enough that she could see the exact color of his eyes, dark brown with flecks of amber, like expensive cognac. Whatever you photograph tonight, whoever you photograph, they already know. Buildings like this have security, cameras, access logs. Someone saw you come in, watched you take position, tracked your movements. And if what you captured is valuable enough to risk this kind of exposure, then the people in those photographs are already making phone calls, already dispatching people to ensure those images never see publication. Jordan's breath caught in her throat because he was right. Of course he was right. She'd been so focused on getting the perfect shot, on documenting the meeting between Marks and King, that she'd convinced herself she could slip in and out unnoticed. Amateur mistake. Potentially fatal mistake. I can help you, Finnick said, his voice dropping lower, more intimate, like they were discussing a business transaction rather than her survival. But first, I need to know exactly what and who you photographed tonight. Jordan met his eyes, seeing the calculation there, the cold assessment of whether she was useful or disposable, and she made a decision that would change everything. Caius King, she said quietly. I photographed Caius King. Finnick Rhodes's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air between them, a recognition, a dangerous interest. A predator identifying prey worth the hunt. Well, he said, his voice carrying a note of dark satisfaction, that changes everything. He gestured toward one of the Barcelona chairs. Sit down, Miss Heller. Jordan Heller. Sit down, Miss Heller. It wasn't a request. We have a great deal to discuss, and not much time to discuss it. Finnick Rhodes had built his empire on the ability to read people in the first 30 seconds of meeting them, to identify their weaknesses, their leverage points, the exact pressure required to make them bend or break. The woman standing in his office, clutching a camera bag like it was a life vest in open water, radiated fear so palpable he could taste it in the air between them. But it wasn't the simple fear of someone who'd stumbled into the wrong place at the wrong time. This was layered, complex. The fear of someone being hunted from multiple directions simultaneously. Sit, he said again, gesturing toward the Barcelona chair with more insistence this time. You're making my security nervous. And when they're nervous, they tend to overreact. Jordan Heller remained standing, her knuckles white around the camera bag strap. I need to leave. I need to get to my editor's office before Caius King's people intercept you, Finnick finished, watching her face carefully. Before they retrieve those photographs you took and ensure you can't testify about what you saw? Before they make you disappear so thoroughly that even your dental records won't be enough for identification? The color drained from her face, confirming what he'd already suspected. She hadn't fully processed the danger she was in. Journalists never did. They saw themselves as observers, documentarians protected by the First Amendment and the power of the press. They didn't understand that people like Caius King viewed journalists the same way they viewed police informants' problems to be eliminated with extreme prejudice. I don't know what you're talking about, Jordan said, but her voice wavered on the lie. Finnick moved back to his desk, pressing the intercom button. Alex, status report. The ex-boyfriend has been removed from the building. Alex's voice came through crisp and professional. He's currently being detained by building security in the lobby for trespassing. The police have been called at his insistence. They'll arrive in approximately 8 minutes. And our other situation? A pause. Then, 2 vehicles arrived in the underground garage 4 minutes ago. 6 individuals, all armed. They're currently bypassing building security using what appears to be law enforcement credentials. Fake, obviously, but effective enough for the rent-a-cops downstairs. They'll reach this floor in less than 5 minutes. Finnick watched Jordan's face as the implications registered. Watched her process that Caius King's response time was measured in minutes, not hours. That she'd triggered something catastrophic the moment her camera shutter had clicked. You need to leave, Jordan said, her voice tight with panic. I'm sorry I brought this to your door, but you need to get out of here before they... Before they what? Finnick interrupted, genuine curiosity coloring his tone. Kill me in my own office? In a building where I own 60% of the commercial real estate? Where half the security personnel answer directly to me? He leaned back against his desk, crossing his arms. Miss Heller, you've made an interesting assumption about who's in danger in this scenario. 6 armed men are coming here because of photographs I took, Jordan said, her voice rising. They're not coming for a conversation. If you have any survival instinct at all, I'll what? Run? Hide? Finnick's voice hardened. I don't run from threats, Miss Heller. Threats run from me. But that's not your concern right now. Your concern is that you're holding evidence that will destroy a city councilman's career and expose a cartel operation worth approximately $200 million annually. Your concern is that Caius King doesn't leave witnesses. Your concern is that the story you're so desperate to publish will die with you in approximately... He glanced at his watch. 3.5 minutes. Jordan's breath was coming faster now, shallow and quick. Panic attack, Finnick noted clinically. She was approaching the edge of her ability to process threat and maintain rational thought. He gentled his voice, just slightly. How long have you been working this story? 6 months, Jordan whispered. Maybe longer. Following the real estate acquisitions, documenting the pattern of... She stopped, seeming to realize she was telling a stranger everything. Why does that matter? Because 6 months of work deserves better than dying in a parking garage, Finnick said bluntly. Because that story you're carrying has value. Because Caius King operating in my city, laundering money through my waterfront, using my territory without permission, that's a problem I've been looking for an excuse to address. Understanding flickered across Jordan's face, followed immediately by suspicion. You're not some white knight businessman who's going to help me out of moral obligation. No. Finnick agreed. I'm not. I'm someone who sees an opportunity when it presents itself. You need protection. I need leverage against King. We can help each other. I don't make deals with... Jordan stopped herself, but not quite fast enough. With criminals? Finnick supplied, allowing himself a cold smile. Miss Heller, you lost the luxury of moral high ground the moment you burst through that door. Your options are currently limited to accepting help from a criminal or dying at the hands of worse criminals. I'd suggest you prioritize survival over ethics. The intercom crackled. 2 minutes, Alex said quietly. They're in the stairwell. Should I intercept? Not yet, Finnick said, his eyes never leaving Jordan's face. Let them reach the hallway. I want to see how they approach. Jordan's hands were shaking now, the camera bag trembling against her hip. I can't. I need to get out of here. The service elevator, the stairs, something. There is no way out that doesn't lead directly to them, Finnick said, his voice hard with certainty. They've covered the exits. They've planned this professionally. The only reason you're still breathing is because you ran into my office instead of anywhere else in this building." He pushed off from the desk, closing the distance between them until he could see the flecks of green in her hazel eyes, see the pulse hammering in her throat. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to give me that camera. I'm going to secure those photographs in a location that even King can't access. And then you're going to trust that I can keep you alive long enough to publish your story." "Why would you do that?" Jordan's voice was barely audible. "What do you get out of this besides eliminating a competitor who's been operating without my permission? Besides gaining leverage over a city councilman who controls zoning decisions for my waterfront properties? Besides owning the gratitude of a journalist who's just handed me the most valuable intelligence I've acquired in 5 years?" Finnick's smile was sharp enough to cut. "I get quite a lot out of this, Miss Heller. The question is, what you get, besides staying alive." "I get to publish my story," Jordan said, but it sounded like a question. "Eventually," Finnick agreed, "after I've had time to use the information strategically. After King's organization is sufficiently damaged that he can't retaliate effectively. After you're safe enough that publication won't result in your immediate execution." He held out his hand, palm up. "The camera, Miss Heller. We're out of time." Jordan looked at his hand, then at his face, clearly calculating risks she didn't fully understand against dangers she was only beginning to comprehend. Her fingers tightened on the camera bag strap. 30 seconds. Alex's voice came through the intercom, tense now. "They're at the elevator bank, armed with suppressed weapons. This is an assassination team, not a retrieval unit." "Camera," Finnick repeated, his voice dropping to something cold and absolute. "Now." Jordan's hands moved to the bag, fingers fumbling with the zipper. She pulled out a professional Nikon, its memory card slot clearly visible. "The photographs are on here. Everything I shot tonight. Everything that proves—" "I know what they prove," Finnick interrupted, taking the camera with efficient care. He crossed to his desk, opened a drawer, and placed the camera inside before engaging what was clearly a biometric lock. "Alex, let them in, but not to this office. Conference room at the end of the hall. Tell them we're negotiating." "Copy that." Finnick turned back to Jordan, who looked like she might collapse or bolt, he couldn't determine which. "Here's what happens next. You stay in this office. You don't speak. You don't move. You don't do anything except breathe quietly. I'm going to have a conversation with King's people about territorial boundaries and the consequences of operating without permission. When that conversation concludes, you're going to leave this building under my protection. Understood? You're going to just talk to them?" Jordan's voice held disbelief. "They came here to kill me." "They came here to kill a journalist," Finnick corrected. "They're about to discover they've walked into something significantly more complicated." He straightened his suit jacket with precise movements. "Stay here. Don't make me regret protecting you." He walked toward the door, then paused, looking back at her one more time. "And Miss Heller? When this is over, we're going to discuss the terms of our arrangement in detail. You're not going to like all of them, but you're going to accept them anyway, because the alternative is an unmarked grave and a story that never sees print." He left her standing there, white-faced and shaking, while he went to negotiate with the men who'd come to end her life. 23 minutes later, Finnick returned to his office to find Jordan Heller exactly where he'd left her, standing rigid beside the Barcelona chair, her eyes fixed on the door like she'd been counting his heartbeats to determine if he was still alive. The relief that flooded her face when he entered was quickly replaced by wariness when she saw the blood on his knuckles. "Is that—" she started. "Not mine," Finnick interrupted, walking to the sidebar and pouring himself 2 fingers of scotch. He drank half of it in one swallow, then poured a second glass and held it out to her. "You look like you need this." Jordan took the glass with trembling hands but didn't drink. "What happened? Where are they? Did you—" "I had a conversation about boundaries," Finnick said, settling into his desk chair with the careful movements of someone whose ribs had taken a few hits. "About the importance of territorial respect. About what happens when people conduct business in my city without proper authorization." "They came here to kill me," Jordan said, her voice rising. "And you had a conversation?" "I had a very persuasive conversation," Finnick corrected. "The kind that involves making certain facts abundantly clear, such as the fact that you're under my protection now, that your photographs are secured beyond their reach, that any further attempts to harm you will be considered a direct attack on my organization and will be responded to accordingly." Jordan stared at him. "Your organization? Did you think I owned 60% of this building through legitimate business ventures?" Finnick's voice held dark amusement. "Miss Heller, I'm going to credit you with enough intelligence to have figured out by now that I'm not a conventional businessman. Jordan stopped, seeming to search for the right words. You're like them, like King. No, Finnick said, and his voice went cold. I'm nothing like Caius King. King moves product drugs, primarily, with some weapons trafficking on the side. He's a parasite who profits from addiction and violence. I run an organization that provides services, that operates within certain ethical boundaries, that doesn't deal in human misery. He paused. But yes, my business exists outside legal frameworks. If that's a problem for you, I'd suggest you reconcile yourself to it quickly. Your survival now depends on my continued willingness to protect you. Jordan finally drank the scotch, draining half the glass in one swallow and wincing at the burn. What did you tell them? That you're a non-combatant under protection. That the photographs are backed up in multiple secure locations with instructions for automatic release if anything happens to either of us. That King's operation in this city exists at my sufferance. And that sufferance has just been revoked. Finnick leaned back in his chair. I also made it clear that I'd be personally displeased if any harm came to you, and that my displeasure tends to be expensive for everyone involved. They'll just try again, Jordan said. Different approach, different time, but they'll report back to King that the situation is more complicated than anticipated, Finnick interrupted. That the journalist they were sent to eliminate is connected to someone with resources and reach. That pursuing this course of action will result in territorial conflict that King can't afford right now. He met her eyes, and then King will make a decision about whether you're worth starting a war over. The color drained from Jordan's face. A war. Don't flatter yourself, you're not that important, Finnick said bluntly. But the territory is. King has been expanding into my waterfront operations for the past 8 months, using my port facilities without paying proper tribute, laundering money through properties that fall under my protection agreements. I've been looking for a reason to push back that wouldn't destabilize the entire Eastern Seaboard's organizational structure. You've just handed me that reason. Jordan set down the scotch glass with careful precision. I'm not a chess piece in some territorial dispute between criminals. That's exactly what you are, Finnick said. The moment you photographed King meeting with Councilman Marks, you became a player in a game with rules you don't understand. The only question now is whether you play smart or play dead. He stood, walking around the desk to stand directly in front of her. I'm offering you a third option. You play protected. In exchange for what? Jordan's voice was tight with suspicion. My photographs, my story, my silence. In exchange for time, Finnick said. 3 months. You delay publication of your story for 3 months while I use the information to systematically dismantle King's operation in this city. You stay in a location I control, under security I provide, while I eliminate the threat against your life. And in 3 months, when King's organization is sufficiently damaged that he can't effectively retaliate, you publish everything. Every photograph, every piece of evidence, every connection you've documented. 3 months, Jordan repeated. 3 months of sitting on the biggest story of my career while you what? Use it as leverage? Blackmail? Extortion? All of the above, Finnick confirmed without shame. Councilman Marks will be given the opportunity to reconsider certain zoning decisions that affect my properties. King will be given the opportunity to withdraw from my territory voluntarily. Your photographs give me the leverage to accomplish both without overt violence. He paused. Though I make no promises about the covert kind. You want me to be complicit in criminal activity, Jordan said. To let you use evidence of corruption for your own criminal purposes before I expose it publicly. I want you to stay alive, Finnick corrected. Everything else is negotiable. Jordan laughed, a harsh sound without humor. You're asking me to compromise every ethical standard I have as a journalist, to delay a story that exposes corruption and criminal enterprise so you can profit from it first, to become an accomplice to staying alive, Finnick interrupted, his voice hard. King's people didn't come here for a conversation, Miss Heller. They came here with suppressed weapons and body disposal equipment. They've done this before. You're not the first journalist who got too close to their operation, and you wouldn't have been the first to disappear without a trace. He leaned closer, invading her space deliberately. So yes, I'm asking you to compromise your ethics. I'm asking you to accept protection from someone who operates outside the law. I'm asking you to prioritize your survival over your principles. Because dead journalists don't publish stories. Dead journalists become cautionary tales that keep other journalists from asking dangerous questions. Jordan's breath was coming faster again. There has to be another way. Witness protection, the FBI, something. The FBI can't protect you from King, Finnick said bluntly. They don't have the reach, the resources, or the willingness to commit the kind of force necessary to keep you safe from a cartel operation. Witness protection means disappearing forever, abandoning your career, your life, everything you've worked for. And even then, King has people inside federal agencies. He'd find you eventually. He straightened, giving her space again. I'm offering you a better deal, protection now, in exchange for delayed publication. You get to keep your life and your story. You just don't get to publish on your preferred timeline. And if I refuse? Jordan's voice was barely audible. Then I let you walk out of this building, Finnick said. I return your camera. I wish you luck. And I give you approximately 6 hours before King's people find you and finish what they started tonight. He returned to his desk, pouring himself more scotch. Your choice, Miss Heller. Compromise your ethics and live, or maintain your principles and die. I'm morally indifferent to which you choose. Jordan was silent for a long moment, her face working through emotions. Finnick didn't bother trying to interpret. Anger, fear, calculation, desperation. 3 months, she finally said. And then I publish everything. Not just about King and Marks, but everything. Including me? Finnick supplied. Miss Heller, if you have evidence of criminal activity on my part, you're welcome to publish it. I'm very careful about what evidence I leave behind. He smiled. But I admire the attempt at leverage. I need guarantees, Jordan said, her voice strengthening. In writing. That you'll protect me for 3 months. That you'll return all my photographs and evidence. That you won't interfere with publication when the time comes. No, Finnick said simply. You get my word. Which is worth considerably more than any written contract in my world. Your word. Jordan's voice dripped skepticism. The word of a criminal. The word of a man who's built an organization on reliability, Finnick corrected. I don't make promises I can't keep. It's bad for business. He walked around the desk again, this time extending his hand. 3 months of protection. Full security. Safe housing. Everything you need to survive. In exchange, you delay publication and allow me to use your evidence strategically. When the 3 months end, you're free to publish anything you want. Do we have an agreement? Jordan looked at his extended hand like it was a snake. If I do this, I'm compromising everything I believe in as a journalist. Yes, Finnick agreed. But you'll be alive to regret it. Jordan closed her eyes for a long moment. When she opened them again, something had shifted: acceptance, resignation, or maybe just exhaustion. I have one condition, one non-negotiable condition before I agree to any of this. I'm listening. Brock? Jordan said. My ex-boyfriend. Whatever happens with King, whatever territorial disputes you're planning, Brock stays out of it. No violence, no threats. No, she struggled for words, no criminal intervention in his life. He's an abuser and a stalker, but he's not part of this. He just showed up at the wrong time. Finnick studied her carefully. You want protection from a cartel that wants you dead, but you want me to leave your abusive ex-boyfriend unharmed. Yes, that's dangerously sentimental of you. That's my condition, Jordan said, her voice firm. I won't be responsible for violence against him, no matter what he's done to me. If you can't agree to that, then we don't have a deal. Finnick considered this, running calculations about leverage and liability, and the strange ethics of someone who'd prioritize protecting their abuser. Fine, he said finally. No violence against Brock unless he becomes a direct threat to your safety. But if he tries to find you, if he interferes with your protection, I reserve the right to handle him as a security concern. Define handle, Jordan said immediately. Relocation, Finnick said. Financial incentives to leave the city. Non-violent persuasion. Nothing that would appear on a police report. He paused. You have my word. Jordan took a deep breath, then extended her hand to meet his. 3 months. Then I publish everything. 3 months, Finnick agreed, clasping her hand. Her palm was soft against his, small and trembling slightly. Welcome to protective custody, Miss Heller. Try not to make me regret this. Too late, Jordan said. I already regret it. Finnick's smile was cold and sharp. You'll regret it more before this is over, but at least you'll be alive to regret it. He released her hand and pressed the intercom. Alex, prepare the car. We're relocating Miss Heller to the penthouse. Full security protocols. Copy that. Ready in 5. Finnick turned back to Jordan. Collect your things. From this moment until I tell you otherwise, you don't go anywhere without security. You don't contact anyone without approval. You don't make any decisions about your safety without consulting me first. Clear? Crystal, Jordan said, but her voice held resentment. I went from one controlling man to another. The difference, Finnick said coldly, is that I'm controlling you to keep you alive. Your ex-boyfriend was controlling you for his own gratification. Learn to appreciate the distinction. Jordan grabbed her camera bag, her movements tight with barely suppressed anger. How long until the car's ready? 4 minutes. Finnick walked to a concealed panel in the wall, pressing his palm against it. The panel slid open to reveal a small arsenal. Handguns, tactical gear, body armor. He selected a Kevlar vest and handed it to her. Put this on. You think they'll... I think King's people are currently regrouping and reassessing their approach, Finnick interrupted. I think the next 4 minutes are the most dangerous you'll face until we reach secured location. I think you should stop asking questions and put on the vest. Jordan took the vest with trembling hands, struggling with the straps. Finnick watched her fumble for 10 seconds before his patience evaporated. Here, he said, stepping behind her and pulling the straps tight with efficient movements. Side panels first, then front clip, then shoulder adjustment. If someone shoots you, the vest stops the bullet, but you'll still have broken ribs. Try not to get shot. Helpful advice, Jordan muttered. It's the best advice you'll get tonight, Finnick said. He pulled his suit jacket back on over his own vest. He'd been wearing one this entire time, she realized. Alex. Status. Cars in position. Underground garage. Bay 7. Route is clear, but I'm seeing unusual traffic patterns on the perimeter cameras. Could be nothing. Could be surveillance. Assume surveillance, Finnick said. Have Marcus bring the car to the service entrance instead. North side. We'll take the maintenance corridor. Copy. 2 minutes. Finnick turned to Jordan. When we move, you stay between Alex and me. You don't run unless I tell you to run. You don't stop unless I tell you to stop. If shooting starts, you drop to the ground and stay down. Understood? Understood, Jordan said, though her voice shook. One more thing, Finnick said, his voice dropping lower. If we get separated, if something goes wrong, if you somehow end up alone, you don't go to the police. You don't go to your editor. You don't contact anyone. You call this number. He handed her a business card with nothing but a phone number printed on it, and you say exactly these words. Package needs immediate retrieval. Then you find somewhere public, somewhere with cameras and witnesses, and you wait. Someone will come for you within 30 minutes. Jordan took the card with numb fingers. And if no one comes, then I'm dead, Finnick said bluntly. And you're on your own. But that's extremely unlikely to happen, so try not to panic prematurely. The intercom crackled. Cars in position. Let's move. Finnick opened the office door, revealing Alex standing in the hallway with another security operative Jordan hadn't seen before. Both men carried weapons openly now, no longer concerned with maintaining civilian appearances. Stay close, Finnick said to Jordan. And Miss Heller? Welcome to your new life. Try not to die in the first 24 hours. Jordan followed him into the hallway, her heart hammering against the unfamiliar weight of the Kevlar vest, and wondered when exactly she'd lost control of her story and gained a protector she wasn't sure she could trust. If you're still thinking about them, subscribe and become part of our story family. Your support is what keeps these emotional journeys alive. Comment where you're watching from. Let's share this experience together. The ride to Finnick's penthouse took 17 minutes, though Jordan would have sworn later it lasted hours. She sat in the back of an armored SUV with tinted windows, Finnick beside her radiating controlled tension, while Alex drove and the other security operative Marcus. She'd learned rode in the passenger seat with one hand resting casually on a weapon she couldn't fully see. Nobody spoke. Jordan watched the city slide past through bulletproof glass, seeing familiar streets transformed into potential threat zones. Every car that fell in behind them could be surveillance. Every person on the sidewalk could be a spotter. Every intersection could be an ambush point. She'd thought she understood danger when she'd started investigating Caius King. She'd received threatening emails, found her apartment broken into, had her car vandalized, but that had been abstract danger, the kind you could rationalize away as intimidation tactics, psychological warfare designed to make her back down. This was different. This was professional violence preparing to express itself. This was people with resources and training actively trying to end her life, and only Finnick Rhodes's intervention standing between her and a shallow grave. We're clear, Alex said finally as they pulled into an underground garage beneath a gleaming high-rise in the financial district. No tail. Building security confirms no unusual activity. Standard protocols anyway, Finnick said. I want full lockdown until we've confirmed King's people have received my message clearly. Already done, Marcus said. Perimeter teams in position. Nobody enters or exits without biometric verification. The elevator from the garage required 3 separate security checks: palm scanner, retinal scan, and a passcode Finnick entered on a keypad Jordan couldn't see. The car rose smoothly, the floor indicator climbing past residential floors toward the penthouse level marked only as PH. Jordan's hands were still shaking. She clasped them together, trying to project a calm she absolutely didn't feel. How long? She started, then had to clear her throat. How long do you think before King responds? He already has, Finnick said. The men in the conference room were his response. Now he'll reassess. Determine if you're worth escalating the conflict. Make a decision about next steps. He glanced at her. Could be hours, could be days. But he will respond. The elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse, no hallway, no public corridor, just immediate entry into private space. Jordan stepped out and barely processed what she was seeing. Floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic city views, minimalist furniture that probably cost more than she made in a year, art on the walls that belonged in museums. The kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself because it was simply assumed. Guest room is down that hall. Second door on the left, Finnick said, shrugging out of his suit jacket and draping it over a chair. Bathrooms attached. Clothes in the closet should fit approximately. I keep various sizes for guests. You'll find everything you need. Guests, Jordan repeated. You regularly have people staying here under protective custody? Not regularly, Finnick said. But occasionally business requires hosting someone who needs security. He loosened his tie with precise movements. You're not the first person to require my protection. You're just the first journalist. Jordan walked slowly toward the windows, drawn by the view despite herself. The city sprawled beneath them, millions of lights creating constellations of human activity. Somewhere down there, Caius King was planning his next move. Somewhere down there, Brock was probably still raging about her escape. Somewhere down there was the life she'd had this morning, before everything changed. I need to call my editor, she said suddenly. Jake will be expecting me to file the story tonight. When I don't show up, when I don't answer my phone. Your editor will assume you encountered difficulties, Finnick interrupted. He'll wait 24 hours, then file a missing persons report. The police will investigate and find nothing. Your apartment will be empty. Your car abandoned in the Peninsula Tower garage. Your trail ending at the 20th floor. He walked to the bar and poured himself scotch. In 3 days, your editor will receive an anonymous message saying you're safe but working an extended deep-cover investigation. He'll find that suspicious but plausible given your reputation for thorough reporting. Life will continue. You've done this before, Jordan said. Made people disappear. I've protected people before, Finnick corrected. There's a difference between disappearance and protective relocation, though I admit the distinction can be subtle from the outside. He held up the scotch bottle. Want some? You look like you could use it. Jordan shook her head. I need to think clearly. I need to. She stopped, pressing her palms against her eyes. God, what am I doing? I'm a journalist. I don't make deals with criminals. I don't delay stories for strategic purposes. I expose corruption. I don't become complicit in it. You're surviving, Finnick said. That's what you're doing. At what cost? Jordan's voice rose. My integrity? My ethics? Everything that makes me who I am? If you're still thinking about them, subscribe and become part of our story family. Your support is what keeps these emotional journeys alive. Comment where you're watching from. Let's share this experience together. At the cost of temporary compromise in exchange for permanent breathing, Finnick said. Which seems like a reasonable trade from where I'm standing. He walked toward her, stopping a careful distance away. Miss Heller Jordan, I'm going to tell you something that might help with your crisis of conscience. Caius King has killed at least 14 people in the past 3 years that I know about. Journalists, mostly, but also 2 FBI informants, a federal prosecutor's paralegal, and 3 civilians who had the misfortune of witnessing transactions they shouldn't have seen. He doesn't leave loose ends. He doesn't take chances. He doesn't accept risk. Jordan's throat was tight. 14 people. That I know about, Finnick repeated. The actual number is likely significantly higher, so when you're questioning whether delaying your story for 3 months is worth staying alive, Remember those 14 people. Remember they made different choices about immediately exposing what they knew, about trusting law enforcement to protect them, about believing that truth and justice would somehow keep them safe. He paused. They were all wrong. You get to learn from their mistakes. You're trying to scare me into compliance. I'm trying to keep you alive, Finnick said. Terror is a reasonable response to your current situation. Jordan turned away from the window, from the view, from the false sense of safety that came with being high above the streets. I hate this. I hate everything about this. I know. I hate that I need you. I hate that I'm dependent on a criminal for protection. I hate that I'm compromising my work for survival. I know, Finnick said again. And I really, really hate that you're right. Jordan's voice broke slightly. That staying alive matters more than my principles. That I'd rather delay the story than die trying to publish it immediately. Finnick was quiet for a moment. Principles are important, he finally said. But they're only useful if you're alive to exercise them. Dead martyrs don't change systems. Living journalists do. Jordan laughed, sharp and bitter. That's surprisingly philosophical for someone who just threatened 6 armed men in a conference room. I'm complex, Finnick said dryly. Try not to reduce me to a simple archetype. It's insulting. Despite everything, Jordan felt her mouth twitch toward something that might have been a smile. What did you do to them? King's people. What happened in that conference room? I clarified the situation, Finnick said. Made certain facts explicit about what would happen if they pursued their current objective. Demonstrated that I had the resources and will to make good on those promises. He rolled his shoulders, and Jordan saw him wince slightly. They were unpersuaded initially. Required more. Concrete examples of my commitment to your protection. Hence the blood on your knuckles. Hence the blood, Finnick agreed. He walked to the kitchen because of course this penthouse had a gourmet kitchen, with marble counters and professional-grade appliances, and ran water over his hands, washing away the evidence of violence with practiced efficiency. They left with a clear understanding of the new territorial boundaries and the consequences of crossing them. King will receive their report and make his own assessment about whether you're worth the cost. Jordan watched him dry his hands on a towel, his movements casual despite the conversation about potential warfare. And if he decides I am worth it, if he's willing to pay whatever cost you're threatening, then we escalate, Finnick said simply. And I have significantly more resources for escalation than King does in this city. But ideally, it won't come to that. King's a businessman first, an ideologue never. He'll run the numbers, determine that the cost-benefit analysis doesn't favor pursuing you, and withdraw. He hung the towel with precise placement, probably while simultaneously attempting to find alternative ways to eliminate the threat you represent, which is why you're staying here, under guard, until the 3 months are complete. 3 months of house arrest, Jordan said. 3 months of being dependent on you for everything. 3 months of having no control over my own life. 3 months of not being murdered, Finnick countered. Try to maintain perspective. Jordan closed her eyes, exhaustion crashing over her in waves. The adrenaline that had kept her functioning was draining away, leaving nothing but bone-deep weariness and the weight of decisions she couldn't unmake. I need to know something, she said quietly. The condition I made about Brock. About not hurting him. You meant that, right? You'll keep that promise? Finnick's expression shifted to something colder. You're more concerned about protecting your abusive ex-boyfriend than you are about the cartel trying to kill you. I'm concerned about not being responsible for violence against someone I used to care about, Jordan corrected. Brock he's complicated. He wasn't always like he became. And I don't want his blood on my hands, even indirectly. Classic abuse victim psychology, Finnick observed clinically. Defending the abuser, minimizing the harm, taking responsibility for his actions. Don't analyze me, Jordan snapped. Just tell me if you'll keep your promise. Finnick studied her for a long moment. I gave you my word. I don't break my word. Your ex-boyfriend will remain unharmed unless he becomes a direct security threat. He paused. But Jordan? You should understand something about the kind of man who breaks ribs because his partner wants to spend a holiday apart. That's not complicated. That's not someone who lost their way. That's someone fundamentally broken in ways that don't heal. I know what he is, Jordan said, her voice tight. I lived with him for 2 years. I know exactly what he's capable of. But I also know I don't want to become someone who uses violence against people just because I can. Even people who deserve it. Noble, Finnick said. Possibly stupid, but noble. He walked back toward the living room, gesturing for her to follow. The security team will be outside your door tonight. Try not to leave this apartment without telling someone. The building is secure, but I prefer redundant safety measures." "Am I a prisoner?" Jordan asked. "You're protected," Finnick said. "Whether that feels like imprisonment or sanctuary depends on your perspective." Jordan looked around the penthouse again, the expensive art, the designer furniture, the windows offering views most people would never see except in photographs. "Gilded cage," she murmured. "Better than a coffin," Finnick replied. He picked up his suit jacket, heading toward what was presumably his own bedroom. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we'll discuss logistics, how you'll communicate with your editor, what story you'll tell your family, how we'll handle the next 3 months. But tonight, you just need to survive. And Jordan," he paused at the doorway, "you did the right thing. Accepting my protection. Making the hard choice. You can hate yourself for it tomorrow, but tonight, just be grateful you're still breathing." He disappeared into his room, leaving Jordan alone in the vast, beautiful space that would be her prison for the next 3 months. She walked to the guest room he'd indicated, found it decorated with the same minimalist elegance as the rest of the penthouse. The closet held clothes in various sizes, all designer labels, all perfectly maintained. The bathroom had luxury toiletries arranged like a high-end hotel, everything she could possibly need except freedom. Jordan sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing the Kevlar vest Finnick had strapped onto her what felt like years ago but had only been an hour. Her phone was in her camera bag. She'd remembered to grab it from her car before fleeing Brock. She pulled it out, seeing 17 missed calls from Jake, her editor, 12 from her mother, 6 from numbers she didn't recognize. She typed out a message to Jake. "Deep cover investigation. Sensitive source. Can't explain yet. Safe but off-grid for a while. Trust me. Story will be worth it." She stared at the words for a long moment, then deleted them without sending. Tomorrow. She'd figure out what to tell people tomorrow. Tonight, she just needed to accept that she'd made a deal with someone dangerous to stay alive, that she'd compromised everything she believed in for 3 more months of existence, that she'd become complicit in her own protection, with all the moral ambiguity that entailed. Jordan finally removed the Kevlar vest, letting it fall to the floor beside the bed. She lay back against expensive pillows and stared at the ceiling of her gilded cage, wondering when exactly her investigation had transformed from career-defining journalism into a fight for survival, and whether she'd ever get back to being the person she'd been this morning before Caius King, before Finnick Rhodes, before she learned that staying alive sometimes meant abandoning your principles. Sleep came eventually, restless and full of dreams, where she ran down endless hallways while doors slammed shut behind her, trapping her in progressively smaller spaces until she woke, gasping in the dark, momentarily forgetting where she was. Then she remembered. Finnick's penthouse, protective custody. 3 months of her life traded for evidence that might already have cost her everything that mattered. She didn't sleep again that night. Morning arrived with pale sunlight filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows Jordan hadn't thought to cover. She'd finally fallen into exhausted sleep around 4 a.m., only to wake 3 hours later disoriented and aching, still wearing yesterday's clothes, her mouth tasting like fear and bad decisions. The penthouse was silent. For a moment, Jordan allowed herself the fantasy that last night had been a nightmare, that she'd wake up in her own apartment, that the photographs on her camera would still be safely stored and unpublished, that Caius King and Finnick Rhodes existed only in her anxiety-fueled imagination. Then she saw the Kevlar vest on the floor beside the bed and remembered everything. She found Finnick in the kitchen, dressed in charcoal slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, reading something on a tablet while drinking coffee from a mug that probably cost more than her rent. He looked up when she entered, his dark eyes assessing her with that same clinical evaluation from last night. "There's coffee," he said, gesturing toward an espresso machine that belonged in a professional cafe. "And breakfast, if you're hungry. Maria prepared it before she left." "Maria?" "Housekeeper. She comes 3 mornings a week, leaves before 8. She's been background checked extensively and has signed confidentiality agreements that would bankrupt her if she violates them. You don't need to hide from her, but you also shouldn't discuss anything sensitive in her presence." Jordan moved toward the coffee machine, trying to figure out its complicated array of buttons and settings. After 30 seconds of futile experimentation, Finnick stood and crossed to her, pressing a sequence of buttons with practiced efficiency. "Espresso, Americano, or cappuccino?" "Americano," Jordan said, stepping back to give him space. "I can make my own coffee." "Not on this machine," Finnick said. "It cost $8,000 and requires specific technical knowledge. Drink what I make you or drink instant. Your choice." Jordan watched him work the machine with the same precise movements he brought to everything. No wasted motion, no uncertainty, just efficient competence. The coffee emerged perfect, rich and dark. In a cup he handed her without ceremony. "Thank you," she said, hating that she had to be grateful for coffee in what was essentially her prison. "You look terrible," Finnick observed, returning to his tablet. "Didn't sleep?" "Slept 3 hours. Kept having dreams about being chased." Jordan sipped the coffee, which was annoyingly excellent. "You sleep?" 4 hours. Standard for me." Finnick's attention remained on the tablet. "I've been reviewing security footage from last night. King's people conducted surveillance on this building until approximately 3 a.m., then withdrew. No attempted entry, no probing of defenses. They're being cautious. Is that good?" "It means King is thinking strategically rather than emotionally," Finnick said. "Emotional responses are predictable. Strategic thinking is more dangerous but also more negotiable." He set down the tablet. "We need to discuss logistics. Your editor, your family, anyone who might report you missing. What's your cover story?" Jordan sat at the kitchen island, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. "I texted Jake, my editor, last night. Said I was pursuing a deep cover investigation with a sensitive source. He'll accept that for maybe 48 hours before demanding more information. Then in 48 hours, he'll receive documentation," Finnick said. "Proof of life. Confirmation you're safe. Request for extended leave to pursue a major story. It'll come from an encrypted email address with verification protocols he'll recognize as legitimate." "How do you know what verification protocols my editor uses?" Finnick's expression didn't change. "I make it my business to understand the people in my city who might be useful or problematic. Investigative journalists fall into both categories." He pulled up something on his tablet, turning it toward her. "This is a draft of the message that will be sent. Review it. Make whatever changes you need to make it sound authentic." Jordan read the message. Seeing her own writing style perfectly mimicked, her usual sign-offs and verbal tics replicated with unsettling accuracy. "You've read my emails. I've read everything you've ever published, and most of your electronic correspondence," Finnick confirmed without apology. "Knowing who's investigating what in my territory is basic operational security. Your story on the waterfront development corruption last year was well researched. You almost exposed one of my subsidiary operations." "Almost? I shut it down 2 days before your article published," Finnick said. "The locations you were planning to expose were moved to different properties. The paper trail was eliminated, and your story ran with accurate information about operations that no longer existed." He retrieved the tablet. "You cost me approximately $3 million in disrupted business, and you never knew it." Jordan felt her stomach twist. "You're telling me you've been monitoring my work for over a year?" 18 months, Finnick corrected. "Since you started investigating real estate transactions in the financial district. You have good instincts for following money, Jordan." "It makes you dangerous," he paused. "It's also why I'm confident your investigation into King is thorough and accurate. You don't publish speculation. You publish facts. I don't know whether to be flattered or terrified." "Be both," Finnick suggested. "It's appropriate." He pulled up another document. "Your mother called 17 times last night. You'll need to contact her today. Tell her." "I'll tell her I'm working a big story and will be out of contact for a while," Jordan interrupted. "She's used to it. I've done deep research before that required going off-grid. Not for 3 months. Then I'll tell her it's the biggest story of my career, and I need complete focus." Jordan said. "She'll worry, but she'll accept it. My mother understands journalism." Finnick studied her. "You're close with her." "She's a single parent who raised me while working 2 jobs. Yes, I'm close with her." Jordan's voice held defensive edge. "Is that a security concern?" "Everything's a security concern," Finnick said. "But family relationships are manageable. Make the call today. Keep it brief. Don't provide location information." He stood, refilling his own coffee. "Now tell me about Brock." Jordan's hands tightened around her cup. "Why?" "Because your ex-boyfriend showed up at exactly the wrong moment last night, which means either he's been stalking you with disturbing effectiveness, or he had information about your location. I need to know which." "He's been stalking me," Jordan said quietly. "For 4 months, since I left him. He has resources, money, connections, probably private investigators. He's found me 3 times before last night. I moved apartments twice, stayed with friends, changed my routines. Nothing worked for long." Finnick leaned against the counter, his expression unreadable. "Tell me about the relationship. How it started, how it ended, what I need to know about his behavior patterns. This feels like therapy. It's tactical assessment, Finnick corrected. I need to understand the threat he represents, both to you and to our security protocols. So tell me about Brock. Jordan took a long drink of coffee, using the time to decide how much to reveal. We met at a media conference 3 years ago. He was charming, successful, attentive, financial consultant for a major firm. He seemed perfect flowers, nice dinners, genuine interest in my work. For the first year, it was good, really good. And then it wasn't. Jordan's voice flattened. Small things at first. Comments about my clothes, my friends, how I spent my time, suggestions that became expectations that became demands. He wanted to know where I was constantly, who I was with, what I was doing. Said it was because he cared, because he worried about me working dangerous stories. Classic isolation tactics, Finnick observed. I know that now, Jordan said. I didn't recognize it then. Or maybe I did and ignored it because I wanted to believe he was just protective, not controlling. She set down her cup. It escalated over the second year. He'd go through my phone, my laptop, my emails. He'd show up unannounced at my office, at interviews I was conducting. He'd get angry if I didn't respond to texts immediately, if I made plans without consulting him first. When did it become physical? Jordan was quiet for a moment. 18 months into the relationship, I wanted to visit my mother for Christmas. Alone, because she lives in a small apartment and couldn't accommodate both of us. He said if I went without him, it meant I was ashamed of him, that I was choosing her over him. When I said I was going anyway, he grabbed my arm hard enough to leave bruises. She touched her left shoulder unconsciously, said he didn't mean to, that he was just upset, that it wouldn't happen again. But it did. 3 months later, I accepted a freelance assignment that required traveling to Miami for a week. He said I was being selfish, that I was abandoning him, that if I really loved him, I'd turn down the assignment. I refused. He dislocated my shoulder. Jordan's voice had gone completely flat, told me it was an accident, that we'd been arguing and he'd grabbed me too hard, that I'd pulled away wrong, made it sound like it was partially my fault. Finnick's expression hadn't changed, but something in his stillness suggested focused attention. How long after that before you left? 6 months. I started planning my exit carefully, moving money into a separate account he didn't know about, keeping important documents at my office, preparing a storage unit with clothes and essentials. I waited until he was at the gym one morning, took what I could carry, and disappeared. Jordan met Finnick's eyes. I thought 4 months was long enough, that he'd move on, find someone else to control. Obviously, I was wrong. Men like Brock don't move on, Finnick said. They view women as property. Property that escaped requires retrieval. He pushed off from the counter. You know he'll try to find you here. He doesn't know I'm here. He knows you ran into an office building. He knows you didn't come out. He'll investigate who occupies offices in that building, who has the resources to make someone disappear, who might have reason to hide you. Finnick's voice was matter of fact. He'll figure it out eventually. The question is what he does with that information. Jordan felt her stomach drop. You said you'd protect me from King's people. Can you protect me from Brock too? I said I wouldn't harm him unless he became a direct security threat, Finnick corrected. If he attempts to breach this building, if he tries to contact you, if he does anything that compromises your safety, he becomes a threat. And I handle threats efficiently. Define efficiently. Relocation, Finnick said. Financial incentives to leave the city permanently. Nonviolent persuasion that makes staying more costly than leaving. He'll receive a very clear message about the consequences of continuing his stalking behavior. Without violence, Jordan pressed. Without lethal violence, Finnick amended. I won't kill him or cause permanent injury. But Jordan, understand something. I'm not operating under the same legal and ethical constraints you are. I don't need to prove he's a threat in court. I don't need evidence that would satisfy a judge. If I determine he's a problem, I solve the problem using whatever methods I deem appropriate. That's terrifying. That's survival, Finnick said. Which is what you signed up for when you accepted my protection. Jordan stood, carrying her cup to the sink with movements that felt mechanical. I hate this. I hate needing someone to protect me from my ex-boyfriend. I hate that I couldn't handle it myself, that I spent 4 months running instead of... Instead of what? Finnick interrupted. Fighting back? Getting a restraining order that he'd ignore? Confronting someone who's already demonstrated willingness to hurt you? He moved beside her, his voice losing some of its cold edge. Jordan, abuse victims don't fail by running. They survive by running. You did exactly what you should have done. The fact that it wasn't enough, that he kept pursuing you, that's not your failure. That's his obsession. Jordan turned to look at him, surprised by what almost sounded like empathy. You've dealt with this before. People running from abusive partners. I've dealt with many types of people needing protection, Finnick said carefully. Abuse victims, witnesses to crimes, people who crossed the wrong organizations. The tactics are different, but the psychology is similar. You're dealing with someone whose sense of control has been challenged, who views pursuit as their right, who won't stop until they reclaim what they believe belongs to them. I'm not his property. I know that. You know that. Brock doesn't believe that. Finnick turned away, retrieving his tablet again. Which is why you're staying here, under security, until this situation is resolved. Both King's threat and Brock's obsession need to be neutralized before you're safe. 3 months of protection from multiple threats, Jordan said. This just keeps getting better. 3 months of staying alive, Finnick corrected. Try to maintain perspective. Jordan looked around the penthouse, the expensive furniture, the designer kitchen, the view she'd never be able to afford on a journalist's salary. How am I supposed to work? I can't just sit here for 3 months doing nothing. I'll lose my mind. You'll have internet access, monitored and secured. You can continue researching, writing, preparing your story for publication when the timeline expires. You just can't communicate directly with sources or conduct in-person interviews. Finnick pulled up another screen. I've had a workstation prepared in the second guest room. Professional setup, encrypted systems, access to databases you'll find useful. Databases. Legal ones, mostly, Finnick said. Property records, corporate filings, court documents, and some less legal ones that might help you connect the remaining dots in King's money laundering operation. Consider it my contribution to your investigative research. Jordan should have been horrified at the offer of access to illegally obtained information. Instead, she felt a traitorous spark of interest. What kind of databases? Finnick's mouth curved into something that might have been approval. I'll show you after you contact your mother and editor. Maintain your cover story. Keep the calls brief, and don't provide any information that could be used to locate you. Clear? Clear, Jordan said, though her voice held resignation rather than agreement. She made the calls from the burner phone Finnick provided, telling careful lies to people who cared about her, creating a cover story about a career-defining investigation that required complete isolation. Her mother was worried but understanding. Jake was suspicious but willing to give her 48 hours before demanding more information. By the time she finished, Jordan felt exhausted despite the coffee, drained by the effort of lying convincingly while maintaining enough truth to be believable. She set down the phone and looked at Finnick, who'd been monitoring both calls from across the room. Adequate, he said. Your editor suspects something, but he'll wait. Your mother trusts you. He gestured toward the hallway. Ready to see your workspace? Jordan followed him to what he'd called the second guest room, finding it transformed into a professional office that rivaled the Tribune's newsroom. Multiple monitors, high-end computer equipment, printer, filing cabinets, and a desk positioned to face the window while maintaining security from external observation. This is... Jordan stopped, unable to finish the sentence. This is what you'll need to continue your work while under protection, Finnick said. I told you I take my commitments seriously. Keeping you alive means keeping you functional, which means providing tools for you to do what you do. He gestured to the monitors. The system is ready. Encrypted communications, secured browsing, access to research databases, everything you need except freedom. Jordan sat at the desk, running her fingers over the keyboard. Why are you doing this? Really? Beyond the territorial disputes with King, beyond the strategic advantages. Why are you protecting me this thoroughly? Finnick was quiet for a moment. Because 14 people died who shouldn't have died, he finally said. Because King operates in my city without consequences, and that offends me professionally. Because you're good at what you do, and the world needs good journalists more than it needs another dead idealist. He moved toward the door. And because, despite what you might think about me, I'm not indifferent to innocent people being murdered for doing their jobs. He left before Jordan could respond, leaving her alone in her new office inside her gilded cage, surrounded by equipment designed to help her do the work she loved while imprisoned for her own protection. She pulled up the first database Finnick had mentioned, seeing information appear that would have taken her months to gather through legitimate channels. Property transfers, shell corporation records, financial transactions that painted a clear picture of King's money laundering network. Jordan opened a new document and began to write, because if she was going to be trapped here for 3 months, she might as well use the time to build the most comprehensive expose anyone had ever published about cartel operations in the city. And if that meant accepting help from a criminal to expose other criminals, if that meant compromising her ethics to eventually serve a greater truth, well, she'd already made that deal. She might as well make it worth the cost. The first week passed in a strange rhythm Jordan didn't know how to categorize. Days spent researching in her office, following money trails through the databases Finnick had provided, building a story that grew more damning with each new piece of evidence she uncovered. Evenings eating dinner. Finnick had either prepared himself or had delivered from restaurants that apparently offered private catering to criminals, sitting across from him at the kitchen island, making careful conversation about everything except the obvious that she was a prisoner in a penthouse, dependent on a man she barely knew for survival. Finnick was an enigma she couldn't solve. He maintained professional distance while simultaneously invading every aspect of her new reality. He never touched her, never crossed the invisible boundaries he'd established, but his presence filled the space constantly. She'd hear him on calls in his office, his voice low and controlled as he conducted business she deliberately didn't think too hard about. She'd see him reviewing security footage, checking in with Alex and the others who protected the building, maintaining vigilance that never seemed to sleep. He was ruthlessly controlled, calculating, always 3 steps ahead of every situation. But occasionally she'd catch glimpses of something else: dry humor when she made sarcastic comments about captivity, genuine interest when she explained journalistic techniques, something that almost looked like respect when she showed him a particularly clever piece of investigative analysis. It was disorienting, dangerous. She couldn't afford to see him as anything other than what he was, a criminal who'd co-opted her story for his own purposes, who was using her evidence to wage territorial war while pretending it was protection. But late at night, alone in her room, Jordan had to acknowledge the truth she didn't want to examine. Finnick Rhodes was keeping her alive. Finnick Rhodes was facilitating her work while maintaining her safety. Finnick Rhodes had done more to advance her investigation in 1 week than she'd accomplished in 6 months of dangerous solo research, and she was starting to trust him, which terrified her more than Caius King's assassins. It was Thursday evening, 8 days into her protective custody, when Jordan finally asked the question that had been building since that first night. They were eating dinner, some complicated Thai dish Finnick had prepared with the same methodical precision he brought to everything, when she set down her fork and met his eyes across the island. "Why are you really helping me?" Finnick looked up from his food. "We've had this conversation. We've had the version where you talk about territorial disputes and strategic advantages," Jordan said. "I want to know the real reason, the one that has nothing to do with business or leverage or King operating without permission. Those are the real reasons. Those are profitable reasons," Jordan corrected. "But they don't explain the office you set up for me. They don't explain you cooking dinner instead of having your housekeeper prepare meals. They don't explain why you've spent hours answering my questions about how your organization operates, giving me information you have no strategic reason to share." Finnick was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he stood, walking to the windows that overlooked the city. "You're right," he said finally. "There are other reasons." Jordan waited, not pushing, giving him space to decide how much truth to offer. "I told you King has killed 14 people I know about," Finnick said, his back to her. "One of those people was my sister." Jordan's breath caught. "What?" 8 years ago. She was a paralegal for the district attorney's office, working on a case that involved cartel money laundering. She found evidence, documented connections, prepared to testify. Finnick's voice remained controlled, but something beneath it had gone cold. "King's people abducted her from her apartment. We found her body 3 days later. They'd tortured her for information, then killed her to send a message about cooperation with law enforcement." "Finnick, She was 26, Finnick continued. Brilliant, idealistic. Believed the system could work if good people were willing to fight for it." He turned to face Jordan, his eyes dark with something that looked like old grief carefully contained. "She was wrong. The system didn't protect her. Law enforcement couldn't save her. She died because she believed truth and justice mattered more than survival." Jordan felt her throat tighten. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry," Finnick said. "Be smart. Learn from her mistake. Stay alive long enough to publish your story instead of dying to protect principles that won't matter once you're dead." He returned to his seat, his movements controlled. "So yes, there are personal reasons I'm protecting you. You remind me of her, that same idealistic certainty that your work matters enough to risk everything. And I can't save my sister, but I can damn well make sure another woman with a camera and a death wish doesn't end up in a shallow grave because King views journalists as acceptable casualties. Jordan absorbed this, understanding clicking into place. This isn't just about territory. This is about revenge. It's about justice, Finnick corrected. Revenge is emotional. Justice is strategic. He met her eyes. King has operated in this city for 10 years without consequences. He's killed people, destroyed families, corrupted institutions, all while law enforcement treats him like an untouchable problem too expensive to solve. Your photographs give me the leverage to change that, to systematically dismantle his operation while maintaining plausible deniability, to make him pay for every person he's killed, including my sister, by using me, by protecting you, Finnick said. There's a difference. Is there? Jordan challenged. Because from where I'm sitting, you're still using my evidence for your own purposes, still delaying my story to serve your timeline, still controlling what I can and can't do. Yes, Finnick agreed without apology. And you're still breathing, still working, still going to publish the story of your career when this is over. We're using each other, Jordan. I get leverage against King. You get protection and access to information you'd never obtain legally. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement. Wrapped in trauma, Jordan said quietly. You're protecting me because you couldn't protect your sister. I'm protecting you because it serves multiple objectives, Finnick corrected. My sister's death is context, not motivation. Don't romanticize this arrangement. We're both getting something we need. That's all this is. But Jordan heard what he wasn't saying, the grief beneath the control, the old wound that had never properly healed, the guilt of someone who'd built an empire on violence while failing to protect the one person who'd mattered most. She understood now why his protection felt almost obsessive, why he maintained such rigid security protocols, why he seemed personally invested in her survival beyond simple strategic calculation. Does King know? She asked. That your sister was one of his victims? He knows, Finnick said. He sent flowers to the funeral with a card that said, "Condolences on your loss." It was his way of claiming responsibility while maintaining deniability. His jaw tightened. I've waited 8 years for the right opportunity to respond appropriately. You've given me that opportunity. So, I'm a weapon, Jordan said. A tool you're using to wage a war that's personal, not business. You're a journalist doing your job, Finnick said. I'm simply ensuring you survive long enough to complete it. How I use the evidence you've gathered, that's a separate matter. Jordan pushed her food around on her plate, appetite gone. This doesn't make me feel better about our arrangement. It's not meant to make you feel better, Finnick said. It's meant to help you understand why I'm committed to keeping you alive with or without your cooperation. Why I'll do whatever's necessary to ensure you survive the next 3 months. Why I consider your safety non-negotiable. He paused. And why you can trust that my protection is absolute, even when it feels suffocating. Trust, Jordan repeated. You want me to trust someone who's admitted to using me for revenge. I want you to trust that my interests align with your survival, Finnick corrected. Whether that constitutes trust in the traditional sense, that's your decision. Jordan stood, carrying her plate to the sink with movements that felt heavy. Your sister. What was her name? Finnick was quiet for a moment. Olivia. Olivia Rhodes, Jordan said quietly. I'll remember her name when I write about King, when I expose what he's done. Don't, Finnick said. Mentioning her connects me to the story, compromises my position, puts additional focus on our family. She deserves better than becoming a footnote in someone else's investigation. Then how should I honor her? Jordan turned to face him. If I can't mention her by name, how do I acknowledge that she was one of his victims? That her death matters? Finnick's expression softened slightly. By staying alive, by finishing your investigation, by exposing King so thoroughly that he can't operate in this city again. That's the only honor that matters, ensuring her death contributed to his downfall, even if nobody knows the connection. He stood, collecting his own plate. Now, I believe you were reviewing financial records from King's Third Shell Corporation this afternoon. Did you find the connection to the councilman's real estate holdings? The subject change was deliberate, a door closing on emotional territory. Finnick clearly didn't visit often. Jordan let it happen, understanding that she'd gotten more honesty than he typically offered, that pushing for more would rebuild walls that had briefly lowered. I found 3 properties, she said, accepting the return to professional ground, all purchased through different LLCs, all traced back to accounts King controls, all rezoned for commercial development after Marks voted to change zoning restrictions. That's actionable, Finnick said. Add it to your documentation. When you publish in 3 months, that connection alone will trigger federal investigations into both Marks and King. They spent the next hour reviewing evidence, Finnick pointing out connections she'd missed, Jordan explaining how she'd structure the story for maximum impact. It was comfortable, almost easy, the kind of collaborative work she'd done with other journalists on major investigations. Except this wasn't another journalist. This was a criminal using her evidence to wage war. A man who'd lost his sister and spent 8 years waiting for revenge. Someone who protected her not just strategically but personally, who'd created a gilded cage where she could continue her work while remaining safe from the people who wanted her dead. When Jordan finally said goodnight and retreated to her room, she lay awake thinking about Olivia Rhodes' idealistic paralegal who'd believed the system could work, who'd died for that belief. Thinking about the 14 other people who'd made similar choices, pursued similar evidence, died similar deaths. Thinking about how she was alive because Finnick Rhodes had decided one journalist's survival mattered enough to risk territorial conflict, to compromise his own operations, to share information that could eventually be used against him. She didn't know if that constituted trust, but it was something close enough to make her grateful and terrified in equal measure. 3 weeks into protective custody, Jordan had established a routine that felt almost normal if she ignored the armed guards and locked doors. Wake at 7, coffee with Finnick where they discussed news and strategy, work in her office until afternoon, researching and writing, break for lunch, more work, dinner together where conversation ranged from journalism ethics to his organization's operations, evenings reading or watching the city lights from windows she couldn't open. It was civilized captivity, comfortable imprisonment, and she was adapting to it in ways that should have concerned her more than they did. The problem, and Jordan was self-aware enough to recognize it as a problem, was Finnick himself. Every day revealed new layers beneath the controlled exterior. He was wickedly smart, his intelligence sharp enough to match her own analytical thinking. He read extensively, his bookshelves holding everything from philosophy to poetry to historical analysis. He cooked with the same methodical precision he brought to everything else, creating meals that rivaled expensive restaurants, and he was unfailingly respectful of her boundaries, maintaining professional distance even when proximity and circumstance would have made other arrangements easy. Too easy. Jordan had started noticing things she shouldn't notice. The way his jaw tightened when he was processing difficult information. The rare genuine smiles that transformed his face from marble coldness into something almost warm. The precise way his hands moved when he was working, fingers quick and efficient. The protective instinct that manifested in small gestures, ensuring she had everything she needed, checking on her welfare, maintaining vigilance that never seemed to rest. She was developing feelings for her captor, which was either Stockholm Syndrome or genuine attraction, and she couldn't determine which possibility was more disturbing. It was Friday evening, 4 weeks in, when the situation crystallized into something she couldn't ignore. They were cooking dinner together, Jordan chopping vegetables while Finnick prepared some complicated French dish that required precise timing and temperature control. Music played from speakers built into the penthouse, something classical she didn't recognize but found soothing. "You're thinking too loud," Finnick observed without looking up from the pan he was monitoring. "What's bothering you?" "Nothing," Jordan lied. "Jordan." She set down the knife. "How do you do this?" "Do what?" "This," she gestured around the kitchen. The penthouse, the situation they inhabited. Maintain perfect professional distance while simultaneously being the most attentive person I've ever lived with. Cook me dinner while planning territorial war. Have conversations about my work that demonstrate genuine interest while using my evidence for your own purposes. She paused. "You're a walking contradiction, and I can't figure out if that's strategic or genuine." Finnick finally looked at her, his dark eyes unreadable. "Does it matter?" "Yes," Jordan said. "Because I'm starting to feel—" She stopped, recognizing dangerous territory. "Never mind. Starting to feel what?" Finnick's voice had gone quieter, more focused. Jordan shook her head. "Nothing." "Forget I said anything." "I don't forget things," Finnick said. He turned off the burner, giving her his full attention in a way that made her skin feel too warm. "Tell me what you're starting to feel." "Comfortable," Jordan said, choosing the safest truth. "Too comfortable. Like this arrangement is normal instead of completely insane. Like I'm not a prisoner being protected from assassins, just someone living with—" She stopped again, not wanting to finish that sentence. "Living with someone," Finnick finished. "Someone who isn't your captor but also isn't your friend. someone who exists in undefined territory that makes categorization impossible. Yes, Jordan admitted quietly. Finnick was silent for a long moment. Then he picked up the wine bottle he'd opened earlier, pouring 2 glasses and handing one to her. I'm going to tell you something, and you're going to hate it. That's not reassuring. It's not meant to be reassuring. It's meant to be honest. Finnick took a drink of wine. You're experiencing a predictable psychological response to extended proximity with someone who controls your environment and safety. It's a natural adaptive mechanism. Your mind is creating positive associations with your protector because that serves survival. It doesn't mean the feelings are genuine. It means you're human. Jordan felt her stomach drop. You think I'm developing Stockholm Syndrome? I think you're responding normally to an abnormal situation, Finnick corrected. And I think you're intelligent enough to recognize that these feelings, whatever they are, aren't built on a foundation that would exist outside this context. He met her eyes. If we'd met under different circumstances, if I wasn't the person keeping you alive and you weren't dependent on me for safety, would you be attracted to me? Jordan stopped, processing the question. I don't know. Exactly, Finnick said. You don't know. Which means any feelings developing now are contaminated by circumstance, power dynamics, and survival psychology. Acting on them would be unethical for both of us. So you've noticed, Jordan said, I've noticed you look at me differently than you did 4 weeks ago, Finnick confirmed. I've noticed the small adjustments in your behavior, how you position yourself closer to me during conversations, how your attention lingers, how you've started finding excuses to extend our interactions beyond what's necessary. His voice remained clinical, analytical. I've also noticed my own responses, that I look forward to our evenings together more than I should, that I've started preparing more elaborate meals than necessary, that I find myself creating reasons to check on you throughout the day. Jordan's breath caught. You're attracted to me. I'm aware of attraction, Finnick corrected. I'm also aware it's inappropriate and potentially damaging to act on it. You're under my protection, dependent on my resources, living in my space. Any relationship that developed under these circumstances would be fundamentally unequal. I won't compromise your free will by pursuing this while you're under my roof. That's very noble of you, Jordan said, unable to keep the edge from her voice. It's self-interested, Finnick corrected. If I acted on attraction now, if I allowed the situation to become sexual or romantic, I'd be no different from your ex-boyfriend using power and circumstance to control someone who doesn't have equal capacity to refuse. That's not nobility. That's basic decency. Jordan set down her wine glass. So what happens? We just ignore this for the next 2 months? Pretend we don't feel whatever this is? We acknowledge it, Finnick said. We recognize it as a normal response to abnormal circumstances. And we maintain boundaries until such time as you're no longer dependent on my protection, at which point, if these feelings persist, we can revisit the conversation as equals. He paused. But Jordan, understand something. When you leave here, when the 3 months are complete and you publish your story, you're going to remember that I'm a criminal, that I operate outside the law, that I've done things you'd find morally reprehensible. This attraction you're feeling now, it won't survive contact with reality. You don't know that. I do know that, Finnick said with certainty. Because I've seen it before. People under protection developing feelings for their protectors, convinced it's genuine, certain it will last. Then the danger passes. Reality reasserts itself. And they realized they were attracted to safety, not to the person providing it. His voice softened slightly. I don't want to be the person you regret when this is over. Jordan looked at him, at the controlled expression, the defensive walls, the careful distance he was maintaining even now. You're protecting yourself, not me. You're establishing boundaries because you're afraid I'll regret you. I'm establishing boundaries because they're necessary, Finnick corrected. For both of us. You need to maintain autonomy and agency in a situation where you have limited options. I need to maintain professional objectivity about your safety, instead of allowing personal feelings to compromise operational decisions. He picked up his wine again. This isn't about fear, Jordan. It's about doing the right thing in circumstances that don't allow for many right things. Jordan wanted to argue, to challenge his cold assessment, to point out that maybe the feelings developing between them were more complicated than simple psychological adaptation. But she also recognized truth in what he was saying, that power dynamics and captivity and dependency created artificial foundations for attraction, that acting on feelings developed in crisis rarely survived transition back to normal life. So we just continue, she said quietly. Cooking dinner together, having conversations that feel increasingly intimate, pretending there's nothing happening between us. We continue being honest about what we're feeling while not acting on those feelings, Finnick corrected. There's a difference between denial and restraint. Feels like the same thing from where I'm standing. Then you're not looking closely enough, Finnick said. He moved closer. Close enough that Jordan could feel the heat radiating from him, see the exact color of his eyes in the kitchen lighting. Denial would be pretending I don't want to kiss you right now. Restraint is acknowledging that I do want to kiss you while recognizing all the reasons why doing so would be wrong. He paused. Can you understand the distinction? Jordan's heart was hammering. You want to kiss me. I want to do significantly more than kiss you, Finnick said, his voice dropping lower. I want to stop being professional and distant. I want to acknowledge this tension that's been building since day one. I want to see if this attraction is as mutual and complicated as it feels. He stepped back deliberately. And I want all of those things ethically, which means not while you're living in my penthouse under my protection, dependent on me for survival. So yes, Jordan, I want you. But wanting isn't the same as taking. And I won't take advantage of circumstances that eliminate your capacity for genuine choice. Jordan was breathing faster now, her skin flushed, desire and frustration warring in equal measure. What if I'm capable of making my own choices? What if I'm telling you this is what I want? Then I'm telling you that your wants are compromised by context, Finnick said. And mine are too. We're both reacting to proximity, to shared intensity, to the artificial intimacy created by confined circumstances. That's not a foundation for anything real. He retrieved his wineglass. So we maintain boundaries. We acknowledge attraction exists. And we revisit this conversation when you're no longer dependent on my protection if we both still want to revisit it. Jordan felt tears prick her eyes, though whether from frustration or genuine emotion she couldn't determine. This is cruel. This is necessary, Finnick corrected. Cruelty would be taking what you're offering right now and dealing with the consequences later. Necessity is protecting you from decisions you might regret, even when those decisions feel right in the moment. He moved back to the stove, resuming the cooking he'd interrupted, returning to the safe territory of preparing food and maintaining distance. Jordan watched him work, seeing the tension in his shoulders that suggested this conversation had cost him more than he wanted to acknowledge. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I think you're wrong about this being psychological adaptation or circumstantial attraction. I think you're using all that rational analysis to avoid admitting you're afraid of actually feeling something for someone. Finnick's hands stilled on the pan. Maybe I am. So you admit it's possible, Jordan pressed. That this might be real instead of reactive. I admit many things are possible, Finnick said. I also admit that possibilities don't justify actions. We maintain boundaries, Jordan. That's non-negotiable. He plated food with precise movements. Now, dinner is ready. Let's eat and discuss something other than feelings we're not going to act on. Jordan took her plate, accepting the subject change because pushing further wouldn't achieve anything except making the remaining 2 months more uncomfortable. But as they ate in careful silence, she recognized something important. Finnick Rhodes had just admitted to wanting her while simultaneously establishing boundaries that prioritized her autonomy over his desires, which was either the most frustrating thing anyone had ever done or the most respectful. She couldn't decide which, so she ate her dinner and pretended the emotional wall between them wasn't getting harder to maintain with every passing day. 6 weeks into protective custody, Jordan made the mistake that would change everything. She'd grown comfortable with the penthouse's rhythms, with the security protocols that felt increasingly like routine rather than restriction. Alex checked in twice daily. Marcus conducted perimeter sweeps every 4 hours. Finnick reviewed footage obsessively, maintaining vigilance that never seemed to sleep. But comfort bred carelessness, and carelessness created vulnerability. It was Tuesday afternoon. Finnick was in a meeting with his advisors. She'd heard him on calls all morning, his voice carrying that particular edge that suggested serious business complications. Jordan had been working on her exposé, building the narrative that would eventually destroy Caius King's operation, when her laptop died mid-sentence. The charger was in her bedroom. Simple retrieval, 30 seconds maximum. She texted Alex per protocol. Getting charger from bedroom, back in 2 minutes. His response came immediately. Wait, Marcus is repositioning. Give me 60 seconds to clear the hallway camera blind spot. Jordan stared at the message, impatience warring with ingrained obedience to security protocols. 60 seconds. 1 minute to grab a charger from her own bedroom in a building where armed guards monitored every entrance. It seemed excessive, paranoid even. She waited 40 seconds. Then her journalist's instinct for efficiency overrode caution. The bedroom was 15 feet away. She could see the door from where she sat. Nothing would happen in the 20 seconds it took to grab the charger and return. Jordan stood, walking quickly down the hallway, entering her bedroom and locating the charger on the nightstand. She'd just unplugged it when something felt wrong, a subtle shift in air pressure, the whisper of movement she hadn't consciously registered. She turned and found 3 men in her bedroom. They moved with professional efficiency, one covering her mouth before she could scream, another securing her wrists with plastic restraints, the third already heading toward the window where a maintenance scaffold shouldn't exist but somehow did. They wore maintenance uniforms, carried tools that concealed weapons, operated with the calm precision of people who'd done this before. Jordan fought anyway, her journalist's brain cataloging details, even while terror flooded her system. Asian features, professional bearing, expensive tactical equipment disguised as maintenance gear, King's people. They'd somehow bypassed building security, exploited the camera blind spot Alex had just mentioned, timed their entry perfectly. "Don't hurt her," one of them said quietly into a comm device. "Boss wants her functional for negotiation." They pulled a hood over her head, plunging her into darkness. Jordan felt herself being lifted, carried toward the window, her mind screaming warnings, her mouth couldn't voice. She heard the scaffold moving, felt the sickening sensation of descent, realized they were extracting her down the building's exterior during the brief window when cameras were repositioning. Professional, calculated, perfectly timed. The descent lasted forever and seconds simultaneously. When the hood came off, Jordan found herself in a van with blackened windows, restrained in a seat between 2 guards who held weapons casually but with clear competence. The vehicle was already moving, merging into afternoon traffic with nothing to distinguish it from thousands of other commercial vans navigating the city. Where Jordan started. "Quiet," one guard said. "Not threatening, just matter of fact. You're not being hurt. You're being relocated for conversation with Mr. King." Jordan's stomach dropped. Caius King, the man who'd killed 14 people. The man whose operation she'd been systematically documenting for destruction. The man who'd sent assassins to the Peninsula Tower and been temporarily thwarted by Finnick's intervention. "Finnick will," she tried again. "Mr. Rhodes will receive communication shortly," the guard interrupted. "Terms will be discussed. You'll be returned unharmed pending satisfactory negotiation." "I'm leverage," Jordan said, understanding crystallizing with sick clarity. "You're valuable," the guard corrected. "There's a difference." The drive lasted 30 minutes, navigation deliberately complex to prevent route tracking. When they finally stopped, Jordan was led through what felt like a warehouse, concrete floors, industrial acoustics, the smell of motor oil and metal. A door opened into an office that tried to project legitimacy but failed expensive furniture that didn't quite match. Artwork that looked authentic but probably wasn't, the kind of space designed to intimidate through approximation of power rather than actual authority. Caius King sat behind a desk that was trying too hard to be impressive. He was younger than Jordan expected, mid-40s, athletic build, expensive suit that projected success, handsome in a generic way, like he'd been designed by committee to blend into professional environments. Nothing about him screamed criminal mastermind, which was probably the point. "Miss Heller," he said pleasantly, "thank you for joining us. Please, sit." Jordan remained standing. "I'm here under duress. Don't pretend this is voluntary." "Fair point," King gestured, and one of the guards pushed her into a chair. "Better. Now we can talk like civilized people." "Civilized people don't kidnap journalists. Civilized people don't photograph private business meetings," King countered. "Yet here we are, both having violated certain social contracts. Let's discuss resolution." Jordan forced herself to breathe slowly, to think like a journalist documenting a story rather than a victim facing her potential murderer. "What do you want?" "Several things," King said, leaning back in his chair with studied casualness. "First, the photographs you took at the Peninsula Club. All copies, all backups, completely erased. Second, your agreement to cease investigating my organization and publish nothing about our operations. Third, he smiled, Mr. Rhodes, to understand that operating in my city without proper deference has consequences." "Your city," Jordan repeated. Finnick would dispute that characterization. "Mr. Rhodes has grown territorial lately," King said, "using your photographs as leverage to encroach on operations that don't concern him, threatening my business relationships, making demands about withdrawal from territories he doesn't control." His voice hardened slightly. "That ends today. You're the reset button, Miss Heller. Your safe return depends on Mr. Rhodes accepting revised terms of our operational agreement. You're using me to negotiate with Finnick. I'm resolving a complex territorial dispute through the most efficient means available, King corrected. Mr. Rhodes values you enough to protect you aggressively. That protection becomes a vulnerability I can exploit. Basic strategic thinking. Jordan felt rage override fear. People aren't chess pieces. Everyone's a chess piece, Miss Heller. The only question is whether you're a pawn or something more valuable. King pulled out his phone, typing briefly. Mr. Rhodes is receiving notification now about your location and the terms for your release. He'll have 4 hours to respond appropriately. During that time, you'll remain here, unharmed but secured. Cooperate. And this ends with simple negotiation. Resist, he shrugged, and I'll be disappointed but unsurprised. A guard led Jordan to an adjacent room, windowless, furnished with a cot and basic facilities, a holding cell disguised as hospitality. The door locked with a heavy metallic click that echoed in her chest. Jordan sat on the cot, mind racing through scenarios. Finnick would respond, she was certain of that. But how? What terms would King demand? What would Finnick sacrifice to retrieve her? And underneath those analytical questions lurked a more primal terror. What if negotiation failed? What if Finnick decided she wasn't worth whatever King was demanding? What if the next 4 hours were the last she'd ever have? Her phone was gone, taken during the initial capture. No way to communicate, no ability to influence the negotiation. She was genuinely helpless, dependent entirely on Finnick Rhodes's willingness to pay whatever price King set for her return. Jordan thought about the past 6 weeks, about dinners and conversations and the attraction they'd both acknowledged but refused to act on. Thought about Finnick's careful boundaries, his protection of her autonomy, his insistence that she maintain agency even in captivity. Thought about how she might never see him again, how the last conversation they'd had was about restraint and timing and doing the right thing. She hoped it wouldn't be their final conversation. Hoped Finnick valued her life more than territorial pride or strategic advantage. But she wouldn't know for 4 more hours, trapped in a windowless room while men negotiated her worth like a commodity to be traded or discarded based on market conditions. Jordan lay back on the cot, closed her eyes, and waited for Finnick Rhodes to decide whether she was worth saving. Finnick received the notification, at 3:47 p.m., a video message showing Jordan restrained in an unfamiliar room, followed by coordinates, terms, and a 4-hour deadline. He watched the video once, his expression going absolutely cold, then played it again, analyzing every visible detail with methodical focus. "Alex," he said, his voice controlled despite the rage burning beneath. "How did this happen?" "Maintenance scaffold," Alex said, his face white with guilt. "They exploited the 60-second camera reposition window. Professional extraction. Military-grade timing. Miss Heller moved early 20 seconds before the window closed. That's when they took her. So this is partially her error," Finnick said. "And partially ours," Alex said. "We should have had redundant coverage, should have anticipated this vector. I take full responsibility." "Responsibility is irrelevant," Finnick said. "Solutions matter, Marcus. I need tactical assessment. King's Warehouse District properties, which are defensible, which are traps." Marcus pulled up schematics. "Coordinates place her at the facility on Pier 19. Heavy security, multiple exit routes, civilian traffic nearby, making open assault problematic. Classic hostage location, easy to defend, hard to attack without collateral damage." "King's terms?" Alex asked. "Complete withdrawal from waterfront operations," Finnick said, reading from the message. "All photographs destroyed. Jordan's silence guaranteed. And interestingly, financial compensation of $5 million. He looked up. "He's not trying to kill her. He's trying to establish dominance, force me into submission through her capture. It's theater." "Does that make her safer or more expendable?" Marcus asked. "Both," Finnick said. He stood, moving to the weapons cabinet he kept secured behind a false wall panel. "King needs me to respond predictably to either pay his ransom and accept humiliation, or reject his terms and accept responsibility for her death. Either outcome establishes him as dominant. So we don't respond predictably," Alex said, understanding dawning. "We respond decisively," Finnick corrected. He selected weapons with practiced efficiency: handgun, tactical knife, Kevlar vest. "King has 12 people on site per Marcus's intelligence. We have that warehouse surrounded within 20 minutes with double their numbers. King expects negotiation. He's getting extraction." That's extremely high risk, Marcus said carefully. If something goes wrong, Jordan dies, and King wins, Finnick interrupted. If we negotiate, King still wins because he's established he can take assets from my protection anytime he wants. The only way I win is by retrieving her before the deadline, demonstrating that capturing people under my protection results in immediate, overwhelming retaliation. Alex was already on his phone, mobilizing teams. How do you want to play this? Fast and precise, Finnick said. No civilian casualties, minimal property damage, but absolute message clarity. King has taken something that belongs to me. I'm taking it back, and anyone who stands between me and that objective becomes a casualty of their employment choices. He checked his watch. 3 hours 53 minutes until King's deadline. More than enough time. The coordination took 40 minutes assembling teams, positioning assets, planning multiple extraction vectors based on Jordan's probable location within the warehouse. Finnick ran the operation from an armored SUV 3 blocks from the target, watching surveillance feeds while his people moved into position with professional silence. Thermal imaging shows 13 heat signatures, Marcus reported. 12 on main floor, 1 isolated in northeast corner, probably Jordan. Guard rotation? Finnick asked. 2 on exterior, 3 roving interior. Rest are static positions near primary entry points. They're configured for defense, not assault. They don't think you're coming. Because King believes I'm smarter than this, Finnick said. That I'll calculate risk versus reward and choose negotiation over rescue. He's wrong. At 5:23 p.m., Finnick gave the order. His teams moved simultaneously from 4 directions, cutting power, breaching secondary entrances, suppressing exterior guards with non-lethal but extremely effective force. Finnick entered through the main entrance, his weapon drawn. His movements controlled, despite adrenaline screaming at him to run toward Jordan's location. The warehouse interior erupted in coordinated chaos. King's people responded with professional competence but were outnumbered and outpositioned. Finnick moved through the facility with Marcus and Alex flanking, clearing rooms with practiced efficiency, heading toward the northeast corner where thermal imaging had located Jordan's isolated signature. He encountered 3 guards in the corridor. They raised weapons. Finnick didn't hesitate. 3 shots, precisely placed, eliminating threats without unnecessary brutality. They'd live, but they'd remember the cost of standing between Finnick Rhodes and someone under his protection. The locked door required 10 seconds to breach. Finnick kicked it open to find Jordan curled on a cot, her eyes wide with terror and desperate hope. She looked intact, unharmed, exactly as valuable as King had promised to keep her. Finnick, she breathed. Can you walk? He asked, already moving to cut her restraints. Yes, I'm fine, they didn't. Jordan stopped as he freed her wrists, pulling her upright with one hand, while keeping his weapon trained on the doorway with the other. You came. You actually came. Did you think I wouldn't? Finnick pulled her close, shielding her with his body as they moved back into the corridor. Stay behind me. Don't stop moving until we reach the vehicles. The extraction took 3 minutes, navigating through a facility his teams had already secured, past incapacitated guards and empty defensive positions. King's people had responded exactly as predicted, focusing on entrances while Finnick's teams had created multiple simultaneous breaches that overwhelmed their capacity to respond effectively. Caius King himself stood near the main entrance, hands raised, clearly recognizing when tactical situations became unwinnable. His expression held calculation rather than fear, already assessing how to spin this outcome, how to recover from a demonstration of Finnick's superiority. Finnick stopped directly in front of him, Jordan protected behind him, his weapon still drawn. You made a significant miscalculation, he said quietly. Did I? King's voice remained controlled. You've just started a war over one journalist. Escalation that benefits neither of us. I've ended a territorial dispute, Finnick corrected, by demonstrating that taking assets from my protection results in immediate, overwhelming response. You wanted to establish dominance. I've established mine instead. The photographs remain secured. Your operations on my waterfront are finished, and you'll withdraw from this city permanently within 30 days. Non-negotiable. And if I refuse, then every operation you control becomes a target, Finnick said. Every property, every account, every person in your organization. I'll dismantle your entire network systematically until withdrawal becomes your only survival option. He lowered his weapon slightly. But you're a businessman, King. You understand cost-benefit analysis. Walking away from one city is cheaper than fighting a war you can't win. King was silent for a long moment, calculation visible behind his eyes. Then he nodded once, sharp and decisive. 30 days. But this conversation isn't over. Yes, it is, Finnick said. Because the alternative is explaining to your organization why you got 14 people killed, including my sister, and couldn't protect yourself when retaliation finally came. Now you have 30 days. I suggest you use them efficiently. He turned away, guiding Jordan toward the exit, his hand firm on her back. They emerged into evening air, surrounded by Finnick's people, multiple vehicles ready for immediate departure. Jordan was shaking now, adrenaline crashing as the immediate danger faded. You risked everything, she said as Finnick helped her into the SUV. You could have been killed. Your people could have... I risked what was necessary, Finnick interrupted. And I'd do it again. You're under my protection, Jordan. That means something absolute, non-negotiable. People who violate that protection learn there are consequences. Jordan stared at him as the vehicle started moving, seeing something in his face she'd never seen before. Not cold calculation or controlled detachment, but raw, barely contained emotion. Fear that hadn't had time to process. Rage that hadn't fully dissipated. Relief so profound it looked almost like pain. You were terrified, Jordan said quietly. When you got that video, you were actually terrified for me. Yes, Finnick admitted, not bothering to deny it. I was terrified. Because losing you would mean failing to protect someone He stopped, jaw tightening. Someone under my care. That's unacceptable. Jordan reached for his hand, threading their fingers together despite everything they'd said about boundaries and appropriate distance. Thank you. For coming. For not negotiating. For choosing rescue over strategic advantage. There was never a choice, Finnick said, his fingers tightening around hers. The moment King took you, the only acceptable outcome was getting you back. Everything else was secondary. They rode back to the penthouse in silence, hands still clasped, both processing how close they'd come to permanent separation. And Jordan understood something she hadn't fully grasped before. Finnick Rhodes's protection wasn't just strategic positioning or territorial calculation. It was personal. Absolute. The kind of commitment that risked everything without counting cost. The kind of commitment that felt dangerously close to something neither of them had been willing to name. 3 months later, exactly 3 months from the night Jordan had burst into Finnick's office, fleeing from threats she hadn't fully understood, she sat in the Tribune's editorial office, watching her exposé go live online. The headline read, Cartel Money Laundering Network Exposed. Councilman Marks Connected to International Criminal Enterprise. 12,000 words. 47 photographs. Documentation connecting Caius King's organization to political corruption, money laundering, and criminal conspiracy. Everything she'd promised to publish, delivered exactly on schedule. Jake, her editor, was reading the piece on his monitor, occasionally making small sounds of approval or surprise. This is extraordinary work, Jordan. Pulitzer-level investigative journalism. How the hell did you stay hidden for 3 months while compiling this? Determination, Jordan said. And really good security. The Tribune's legal team has reviewed everything, Jake continued. We're ironclad on sources, documentation, verification. This goes live in, he checked his watch, 4 minutes. After that, your life is going to become extremely complicated. Federal investigations, media attention, possible testimony. You ready for that? I've been ready for 3 months, Jordan said. The article published at noon. Within 20 minutes, Jordan's phone exploded with calls from other journalists, law enforcement, attorneys, people wanting comments or interviews or explanations. She ignored most of them, watching the story propagate across news platforms with the particular satisfaction of someone who'd risked everything to tell truth that mattered. Her phone rang with a number she recognized immediately. Finnick. It's live, she said by way of greeting. I saw, Finnick said. It's good work, Jordan. Better than good. You've just triggered federal investigations that will take years to complete, destroyed multiple criminal networks, exposed corruption at city council level. You should be proud. I am proud, Jordan said, and grateful. Without your protection, I'd never have survived to publish it. About that, Finnick said, his voice shifting to something less professional. Our agreement was 3 months of protection in exchange for delayed publication. The 3 months are complete. The publication is live, which means our arrangement has officially concluded. Jordan felt her stomach tighten. So I'm no longer under your protection. You're no longer obligated to accept my protection, Finnick corrected. There's a difference. King has withdrawn from the city as agreed. The immediate threats have been neutralized. You're free to return to your life, your apartment, Normal journalism without armed guards and restricted movement. Is that what you want? Jordan asked. For me to leave? Finnick was quiet for a long moment. What I want is irrelevant to what's right. You deserve freedom, Jordan. You deserve to live without the restrictions I've imposed for 3 months. You deserve to make choices about your life that aren't influenced by captivity or dependency or circumstantial attraction. We're back to that conversation, Jordan said. About whether what we feel is real or reactive. We never left that conversation, Finnick said. We just postponed it until circumstances changed. Now they've changed. You're free. Which means if you choose to see me again, if you choose to explore what might exist between us, it'll be genuine choice made by someone with full autonomy, not circumstantial attachment formed under duress. Jordan looked around the Tribune office, the familiar chaos, the ringing phones, the life she'd lived before Caius King and Finnick Rhodes had complicated everything. She could return to this completely, resume her career as if the past 3 months had been nothing but an extended research project. She could walk away from Finnick Rhodes and everything he represented, the danger, the moral ambiguity, the criminal operations she'd deliberately avoided investigating too closely. She could choose safety, simplicity, the path that didn't require justifying attraction to someone who operated outside every ethical boundary she'd built her career around. Or, Jordan said slowly, I could acknowledge that 3 months of proximity gave me time to see who you actually are beneath the criminal reputation. That living with you taught me to distinguish between control and protection, between manipulation and genuine care. That what I feel for you isn't despite knowing what you are, but because of understanding why you became it. Jordan. I'm not finished, she interrupted. You spent 3 months protecting my autonomy while simultaneously keeping me alive. You respected boundaries even when it cost you. You risked your life to rescue me, when negotiation would have been strategically smarter, and you've spent the past 10 minutes trying to give me permission to walk away because you think that's what I deserve. She paused. But what if what I deserve is choosing to stay with someone who values my freedom enough to encourage me to use it, even if it means losing me? Finnick's voice had gone rough. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to have dinner with you, Jordan said. Tonight. Not in your penthouse where I'm protected. In a restaurant where I'm choosing to spend time with you without any tactical advantage or security requirement. I want to see if this attraction survives contact with normal circumstances. I want to find out if partnership is possible between a journalist and a criminal who both value truth enough to risk everything for it. That's dangerously optimistic. I've spent 3 months being dangerously optimistic about survival, Jordan said. Might as well apply it to relationship potential too. She heard him laugh, a real laugh full of surprise and something that sounded like hope. Dinner. Tonight. Somewhere public where you have complete freedom to leave if you decide this is a terrible idea. 7 p.m., Jordan said. And Finnick? I won't be bringing security. But you probably should, because dating a journalist who just destroyed a cartel network might make you a target. I'll risk it, Finnick said. See you at 7. Jordan ended the call and returned her attention to the news coverage exploding across every platform. Her phone rang again, federal prosecutors wanting to schedule interviews, the FBI requesting cooperation, attorneys offering legal representation for the inevitable complications. She answered the important calls, scheduled meetings, began the process of transforming 3 months of research into actionable prosecution against people who'd believed themselves untouchable. This was the part of journalism she loved, not just exposing corruption but ensuring the exposure led to consequences, to justice, to systematic change. At 6:30 p.m., Jordan left the Tribune office and went home, not to the penthouse that had been her gilded cage, but to her own apartment that security had monitored but she hadn't inhabited for 3 months. It felt smaller than she remembered, simpler, filled with the life she'd lived before everything changed. She showered, changed into clothes that weren't designed for security protocols, and stared at her reflection wondering if she was making a catastrophic mistake. Dating Finnick Rhodes meant accepting moral complexity she'd spent her career condemning. It meant being partnered with someone whose business involved activities she couldn't ethically ignore. It meant constant tension between her principles and her attraction to someone who operated outside every legal framework she respected. It meant choosing love, or whatever this was, over the simpler path of maintaining professional boundaries and ethical clarity. At 6:55, Jordan grabbed her keys, locked her apartment, and headed toward the restaurant where Finnick would be waiting, where they'd discover whether 3 months of captivity had built something real, or just taught them to confuse survival with connection. She walked into the restaurant at exactly 7 p.m. and found Finnick at a corner table, dressed casually in dark jeans and a charcoal sweater, looking less like a mafia boss and more like someone she might have met at a bookstore or coffee shop. He stood when she approached, his eyes holding question and uncertainty and carefully contained hope. "You came," he said. "Did you think I wouldn't?" Jordan smiled, echoing his words from months ago. "I thought you'd be smart enough to recognize this is complicated and probably inadvisable," Finnick admitted. "I am smart enough," Jordan said, sitting across from him. "I'm just choosing complicated over simple. Seems to be my pattern lately." They ordered dinner, made careful conversation about her article's reception and his business's transition toward more legitimate operations. A promise he'd made, apparently, to honor her exposure of criminal networks by gradually withdrawing from the same activities. They talked about King's withdrawal from the city, about Brock's surprising relocation to California following some encouragement from people Finnick knew, about the future that stretched uncertain and promising before them. And somewhere between appetizers and dessert, Jordan reached across the table and took Finnick's hand, threading their fingers together with deliberate intent. "So here's my proposal," she said. "We try this, carefully, honestly, with full awareness of all the reasons it shouldn't work. I continue investigating stories that matter, including stories that might eventually expose people in your world. You continue whatever operational transition you're planning, knowing I won't compromise my journalism to protect your interests. We figure out how to be partners who respect each other's autonomy, while occasionally wanting to control each other's safety." "That sounds extremely difficult," Finnick observed. "Probably," Jordan agreed. "But I've spent 3 months learning that the most valuable things usually are difficult, that protection and control aren't the same, that love and consumption are different, that two people can care about each other while maintaining the boundaries that preserve who they are individually." "Love," Finnick repeated carefully. "Or whatever this is," Jordan amended. "We can name it later, when we're more certain it'll survive normal life without armed guards and assassination attempts." Finnick's thumb traced circles on her palm. "I can't promise I won't be overprotective. I can't promise I won't want to eliminate every threat that comes near you. Can't promise this will be easy or simple or anything other than constantly complicated." "I'm not asking for promises," Jordan said. "I'm asking for partnership, for mutual respect despite fundamentally different approaches to ethics and law, for someone who'll fix problems without controlling my life, who'll love me without consuming my autonomy." "Fix without controlling," Finnick said slowly. "That's a difficult balance." "You've been managing it for 3 months, Jordan pointed out. "Might as well keep practicing." Finnick raised her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles with a tenderness that seemed at odds with everything she knew about him. "Then yes, partnership, with all its complications and contradictions, with full acknowledgement that this might end spectacularly badly. Or spectacularly well," Jordan countered. "Or that." Finnick agreed. They finished dinner talking about everything except the danger they'd survived and the uncertain future stretching before them. And when Finnick walked Jordan back to her apartment, when he kissed her goodnight on her doorstep with the careful restraint of someone who'd been waiting 3 months for permission, Jordan understood something fundamental. Love, or whatever they were building, wasn't about perfect circumstances or ethical clarity or simple choices. It was about two people choosing each other despite complications, building partnership on foundations of mutual respect, learning to fix problems without destroying autonomy in the process. It was messy and complicated and probably inadvisable, but it was real. And real, Jordan had learned, was worth every risk.